I have a feeling most of you, if you're going to write agents or so, that's what you will be using. Now you go, what did you just do the last 2 days? Nothing has changed. You still do exactly what you've done the last 2 days. That framework I'm showing you gives you additional functionality that works behind the scenes. But it gives you some of the functionality we have touched on where the common framework doesn't support it because it's at the lower level. SBP stands for the Australian SIS, that's the S, Baseline Profile, P. Oh, that's quickly what we go through in that presentation. What is the SBP? What are the objects of it? And what's the framework doing? But it's a customized specification, a cut down version of the Australian SIF Specification 1.2. The 1.2 holds maybe 30 objects. Those objects, as we've seen in the past, and the 2 common ones we dealt with, or 3 common ones, student personal, school info, they have very few mandatory fields. I think the student personal has 2. One is the local ID, and the other one is the first name, and that's it. That's in most cases not very useful. You can't really do much with that. In very, very, very few cases, that's enough information. So what that baseline profile does, by cutting down on the number of objects, there will only 8 of them, make up that spec, it will add more stringent rules on those objects. So, going back to the student personal, just the local ID and name, which are still mandatory, there will be additional fields which are mandatory in that specification. That makes it useful. It's a whole bunch of vendors sat down and say, these are our systems. To really make them work, what's the minimum requirement our systems have? And this, look, that system said, I have this. The other system said, I have that, and so on. Okay. What's the common bits? Middle bit? That's what kind of for the SBP. Then they go, oh, but I don't have this, I still haven't got that. They start agreeing, okay, we change a little bit in our software, might do a little bit tweaking here, so we meet in the middle. What that means then, they can integrate their software fairly easily. They can write a fairly generic 8 objects at the moment are made out of the 30. You will see which objects and you will all go, yes, sure, that makes sense. But it's an important object. Things we don't really care too much for those SISs and LMSs. They're out of it. It might grow over time as well, a little bit bigger, but I doubt it will become much bigger than this, because the objects that have been chosen are the ones that make most sense for all of those systems. It's considered that could be a global, not just Australia baseline, it could be a global baseline, because in the US they still have students, they have schools, they have courses. That's no difference there. Students enrolled in schools, enrollments, no difference there. In England too, it's the same principle. So these objects are the ones they most likely have too. In SIF version 3, there is a talk of a global data model. Instead of having these long panels everywhere, where things vary between them, still are very similar, and learners to students, still the same conceptually, and so on. That baseline profile moves towards that very much so. And I have a feeling maybe with 1 or 2 more objects that will be global model.